Hello everyone, welcome to RightViews book review. I'm Rahul Devdhar. Today we'll be reviewing this book, How Asia Works by Joe Studwell. The book tries to explain the model followed by the Asian countries in their development. The author includes description from Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, including Southeast Asian countries. The book is classified into 4 parts. The first part deals with agrarian and land reforms. The second part deals with export-oriented manufacturing and its importance. The third part deals with the limitations and control of financial institutions in this process. And finally, the fourth part, separate part, is dedicated to the development of China itself. Coming to agriculture, the author really emphasizes on what he calls the triumph of gardening, which is basically a non-mechanized and non-industrial approach to farming, a family-oriented approach to farming in Asia, which has worked better. And the yields and the quality of produce, as per his study, is better. And therefore, land reforms to enable and enhance this farming by families and individuals is encouraged. The reality of this reform is that land is the most difficult reform to undertake, but it is very essential. And he makes this point very emphatically that it is the agrarian reform that releases the capital for industrial activity. It is the agrarian reform which creates the discipline for the manpower that will be used and deployed in the industry in the second phase. Another important aspect of agricultural reform, as per the author, is that higher agricultural productivity prevents the loss of foreign exchange. If your country doesn't have enough agricultural produce, then high value foreign exchange for developing countries has to be wasted in procurement of agricultural inputs. And that can be avoided by undertaking an elaborate agricultural and land reform. The next phase of development in Asia actually came from export-oriented manufacturing, and specific industries were chosen, and there was a mechanism put in place to weed out the inefficient manufacturing units and to make sure that the efficient manufacturing units get the capital and get the scale to compete globally. In case of Korea, he gives an example of the steel and car industry. And his important consideration is that the export-oriented manufacturing is the right strategy to pursue because it absorbs the excess labor from agriculture and it can use and deploy the skills that the people have learned in sort of reformed agriculture practice, and it can be expanded or enhanced. So the skill required in this manufacturing, export-oriented manufacturing, is just an incremental addition over the skills that they have in agriculture. If we want widespread prosperity, then it is important to have the export-oriented manufacturing as per this author. The third part of the book deals with control and direction of the financial institutions, and this takes inspiration from the MITI of Japan, which guided the banks through a process of lending to specific industries. It also is taking inspiration from the Korean experience. It also uses contrary examples where governments did not control the financial institutions or banks in their lending and did not direct the lending to specific sectors. This directed capital is required to create mass prosperity by use of this export-oriented manufacturing. And the export-oriented manufacturing does not thrive or prosper without an easy access to capital. The final part deals with China, and China's experience has been a little different because in all other countries we had government separate from the private industry. In China, it was the state-oriented enterprises which undertook the development. And in here, it became very important to create a performance benchmarks within the state-owned enterprises so that they compete on an equal footing amongst themselves while being globally competitive at the same time. The critical aspect that author has highlighted is basically the reform undertaken by Zhu Rongji, where he put in place a kind of metric system which compared the performance of variety of state-owned enterprises and how they are supposed to be oriented towards performance and competitiveness so that they can be the export champions for China. There are few aspects about this book which are very interesting. The first important thing about this book is that the author has distilled a model which comprises agricultural reform, export-oriented manufacturing, and directed financial institutions as a template, and he has viewed the developments and history of Asian countries through this lens. Now, this is an advantage as well as a disadvantage. He's tried to find out exceptions to this, so he has done a good job on explaining the model and where it deviates and where the experience has deviated from the model itself. But in effect, his starting point is the model. It's not the model is the conclusion of the process, but rather it's the starting point of the process. And he has evaluated variety of countries through this model. And that is the first part of this book. The second part of the book that struck me was that this book doesn't recommend blind free marketism. What it recommends is that government sponsorship, state subsidies, backing the right industry. So it asks for government interventions. However, it calibrates how that government intervention has to be so that it is effective. And the goal of the government intervention is to create competitiveness globally. And that is very critical to understand. The third aspect is that this model of Asian development is definitely worth studying, yet the model cannot be applied as it is for countries, let's say like India and subsequently developing countries, because the growth model of the world has changed, like we explained in an earlier video. You can find the link on the video and in the description. Do watch that video. And the growth model itself is changed, and we are going to develop new growth models. However, there are certain learnings that we can definitely take away from this book, including developing world-class competitiveness and developing it through a method of competition domestically. And that is crucial, if you ask me, to arrive at a global competitiveness. This book is a must read for all the policymakers in developing countries. Also, it is a must read to understand the kind of economic history and development history of Asia. And it also busts some myths, particularly about large-scale industrial farming, that government intervention which is required, and the kind of subsidies. And it also is critical of the reforms enforced by IMF and World Bank when they provide aid to developing countries. So all in all, there are a variety of learnings. It's a must-read book. Definitely go read this. Subscribe to our channel, like and share this video. Do follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Parler, and also join us for our long-form podcast. The links are on your screen and in description below. Thank you for watching.